60% of small businesses fail after business disruptors like COVID-19. How do you build business resilience, learn from poor leadership, and minimize risk while not sacrificing the progress you have already made? Stay tuned to find out.
When you're building your empire, there's a lot of things. You're worried about getting clients. You're worried about marketing. You're worried about branding. You're worried about your supply chain. You're worried about a lot of these things. The one thing that they don't really teach much in most places, and don't really talk about much because it's the bad side of things, which is business disruptions.
Today's show is brought to you by Rooftop Leadership. Ambitious Fed, if you're looking to gain relevance in your next venture in the new landscape of the pandemic threat, overwhelming uncertainty, social distancing, and ongoing human division, I encourage you, Ambitious Fed, to own your life, own your story, and own every room you step into through your rooftop story. Check out rooftopleadership.com now to check out their upcoming live virtual event. And if you're ready to take your leadership to the next level, make sure to enter in promo code AMBITIOUS to take advantage of your 10% military discount. Welcome to the Ambitious Vet Podcast. My name is Chris, Marine Corps combat veteran, social entrepreneur. Here I dive into the trenches with today's most ambitious, goal-oriented, and growth-minded military veterans on the planet to empower you with the golden grenades needed to break through new levels of satisfaction, fulfillment, and success after stability is no longer a challenge to overcome. Buckle up, ambitious vet. It's time to grow.
It's time to get into the trenches, dig into your purpose, and fire up your life fulfillment. The Ambitious Vet Podcast starts now.
What's going on, ambitious vets? We're right back inside the trenches with Dave Weiner. He's an Air Force veteran who served both military and civilian communities passionately for well over 27 years inside arenas like law enforcement and corporate security. Notably, he's implemented a mental health outreach program for veterans called VMET, or Veteran Mental Evaluation Unit, and Threat Management Unit to proactively prevent acts of violence in a healthcare setting that caters to the veteran community. The VMET program has been adopted by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs and is currently being rolled out as a pilot program at several major Veteran Affairs medical centers nationwide. Now, Dave is founder and CEO of Secure Measures LLC, a veteran-owned management consulting firm based in Southern California. Dave, welcome to the show, baby.
Chris, what's going on, brother? How are you?
Not too
Thanks
much,
for having
man.
me on the show.
It's great to have you. I mean, I miss the weather in California, man. I'm jealous over there looking at you all tanned up and all that.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit it's been a little bit hot lately, but that's all right. You know, we've been out here in the Inland Empire. We've been well over 100 degrees, so it's all good though. It's all good. You still can't beat the weather out here.
It always is. It always is, man. Well, go ahead and fill the gaps of that introduction, man. Let us know a little bit of an interesting fact about you.
A little bit of an interesting fact. Well, I like long walks on the beach. Whoop, wrong show. My apologies. My apologies for that. I not an interesting fact to people who know me, but I think I'm a go-getter. I like to chase it. And I love the adventure, and I love the freedom working for myself and my own veteran-owned small business really has really taken a hold of me. You know, you really truly do get to be your own boss, which is excellent. Having spent most of my time in government or corporate service, you have a series of masters that you have to, pay homage to all the time. And it can be painful, quite frankly, especially if you have the wrong leadership, which I feel I've been pretty fortunate over the years. So I love to go get it every day.
Yeah. I mean, I know when we sat down the first time to kind of tee up this episode, it was just boom. This is what I got going on. Even Ambitious Vet, before we hit record here, he was closing a big deal for the upcoming election season and stuff like that. He's always moving. And that's one thing I love about you is you always got something going on, always got resources, opportunities for everyone around you. So that's key. So I want to kind of dive into your experience, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I mean, you transitioned from active duty in '97 of the United States Air Force. And you, unlike some vets that go out there and go into tons of different industries, right, and kind of just fail their way forward, you kind of transitioned right into the same kind of role that you were already in the military, but you spent 13 plus years, right, being a police officer before you actually got into being a chief of police, and later more executive roles and stuff like that, and then creating that innovative program called VMET, right? But you are a prime example of just consistency plus time equals, you know, compound success, right? So I want you to kind of break that down to an ambitious vet that may be listening to this. Is how was that journey the first few years, and what are some landmines that you hit as you were taking that journey?
Sure. So one of my personal mantras is always say yes to opportunities. There are a ton of them, and sometimes those opportunities are disguised as work, right? But the reality is, you know, I said yes to a lot of things. I was offered a lot of opportunities, and I didn't say no. Having a positive attitude and kind of moving forward through my career really helped. And, you know, I would say some of the landmines I ran into were poor leadership. And when you've had good leadership, you can distinguish between the two, which is great, you know. And I took a lot of that information and learned the kind of leader that I didn't want to be. When I grew up to be a leader, I didn't want to be the kind of leader that nobody wanted to follow, right? And, you know, I'm sure many of your listeners have had, you know, leaders that were just, you know, soup sandwich for sure, you know. And the reality is, you know, nobody wants to follow those folks into battle or otherwise. So learning from those poor leaders. And I look at those I look at being under a poor leader as an opportunity, right? I don't have problems. I have opportunities. Okay. There are no problems in my world. There's only opportunities to address them. And, you know, so learning from those poor leaders helped shape my leadership philosophy, my leadership style, how I address and worked with my troops, et cetera, especially in the police department. That was a big driver.
Yeah, no, that's great. Ambitious vet, if you're listening to this, you know, look at what are some leadership around you currently. If it's, you know, if you are a mid-level manager and you have executives that you're just seeing attributes that, you know, may not be what you would potentially do in that situation, but continue to find those gaps, find those as opportunities. Don't look at it as a limiter. It sounds like, you know, Dave, you did a great job as far as finding that and then filling those gaps for yourself, which I think a lot of ambitious vets can get from. But my question to you with that is, yeah, I mean, what were some of those leadership skills that you started finding as you got out, which had you kind of get to the level of success that you are, you know, right now?
Well, I think first and foremost, emotional intelligence is huge. Because you as a leader, you really need to be in control of your emotions, you're in control of your faculties. That doesn't mean you're never going to get mad. It's just you recognize that you are mad, and then you know how to either calm yourself or deal with it at that particular time. Having empathy for others. You know, being in a leadership role doesn't mean you tell people what to do and they automatically do it.
Yeah.
That is not my experience. You know, you can tell people what to do, or you can ask them, hey, can you please get this done? There's nothing wrong with that, right? You know a lot of us in the military are used to structures and order and things of that nature. But when you transition into the civilian world, it's definitely different. And you can't necessarily administrate things like that, even with folks who are prior military. It's just a different environment, and you have to recognize that these are two very different environments. And, you know, you should really show compassion. And moreover, be transparent. If the baby's ugly, tell them the baby's ugly. That's the reality, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So good.
You have to you have to be honest with people, whether the information is bad or good. We always want to tell people the good news, but we hardly ever want to tell them the bad news.
Mm,
People will have, I believe, in my personal experience, people will have more respect for you if you share the bad news with them transparently and say, hey, this is what it is. Hey, you didn't get the promotion, you didn't get your raise, you didn't get this, you didn't get that, but here's why, and let's see what else we can do. Right?
mm.
This isn't a
Yeah,
dead end. It isn't a dead end. So I think those are important qualities for a leader.
yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for dropping those in. Because it's a big deal, right? And I think also with leadership, with what you're talking about here is like there's a way that a veteran performs inside of corporations, right? I know for myself, my first career post-military is I left because my leadership seemed lazy to me. I was outperforming my manager and I felt like a workhorse for him. So I think that's what inspires a lot of new veteran owned businesses, veteran entrepreneurs, that they're just like,
Yes.
okay, well, this manager, this executive is kind of laid back and attached to the status quo. I want to go out and create my own solution to this problem. So yeah, I mean, how do you translate that to a beginning startup veteran entrepreneur as far as, hey, I tried that corporate life and how do I develop these leadership skills? Because it's different leadership skills from the corporate world to being a startup entrepreneur. What do you think the leadership skill differentiator is there?
Well, you definitely have to be a self-starter. You have to be able to lead yourself, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be able to give yourself your own structure, in essence. So when I first retired from law enforcement, which isn't too different from transitioning from the military, there are some similarities, I would say. But when I retired, I had to give myself structure. So I got a planner and I planned out my entire day. Hey, this morning I need to go file my paperwork to form my LLC. Tomorrow I need to get with the VA so I can get certified as a veteran-owned small business. You got to give yourself structure and you got to start mapping and planning things out. Otherwise, you're just kind of running off, willy-nilly. And, I always tell people, pursue your passion, pursue what you love to do. It's going to feel like every day is going to feel like you're not working at all because you're doing something you truly, truly love. Right. But the reality is that can quickly spiral out of control into something you hate. If you don't manage your time wisely and you don't manage, your interactions with other people. And I know that may sound bad, but let me qualify that. There are people out there for whatever reason that will waste your time. Okay. For a variety of reasons. Okay. So you have to be very selective with your time as an entrepreneur because there's only so many hours in a day. And you're going to be working most of them. This is the hardest thing anybody can ever engage in. So, to kind of coin a phrase, something we were joking about, before we went live, which is you better strap on your pair of golden grenades pretty tight for this ride, because the reality is being a business owner isn't for everyone, and you know what? I give a lot of people credit who go out there, really give it their A game, try and fail. You know what? At least you went out there and you gave it your A game, which means that you're probably built for the journey, but for whatever reason, your business model, your product, your service, whatever, wasn't in demand, nobody wanted it, or it just didn't work. So I always tell people, don't do it alone. Look for a mentor, look for somebody who's going to be able to, somebody who's at a successful level, who can say, hey man, come over here, let me mentor you, let me show you the way, let me show you some steps you can take to be successful in the beginning.
Yeah. No, I love that because you need more firepower too, right? And I think even for myself, building this movement is just finding ways to find the right team members and having a good screening process, stuff like that, because like you think about it, I was a Marine. A lot of listeners are Marines, and it takes a 3-month qualification process. You got to earn that title, right, before you get that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And I think the screening processes of bringing in potential new leaders within your company, or just being more proactive, which we're going to dive into here in the next topic, which I'm excited about, because that's key. I mean, when we sat down the first time to talk about this episode, Dave, 40 or 60% of small businesses fail after disasters like COVID-19, right? So my question to you is, how do we build this business resilience, man? I think it's a cool buzzword. I looked it up and I was like, resilience is being adapting. I was like, my Marine inside of me was like, yeah, adapt and overcome. And
Yep.
business is just like, how do we sell more commerce? How do we make more money? So break that down for us. How do we build business resilience during this time?
So while you're, there are a lot of things that as a business owner, and this as well, Chris, that, when you're building your empire, there's a lot of things. You're worried about getting clients. You're worried about marketing. You're worried about branding. You're worried about your supply chain. You're worried about a lot of these things. The one thing that they don't really teach much in most places, and don't really talk about much, because it's the bad side of things, which is business disruptions. And business disruptions can be anything from a power outage to an earthquake, to a tornado, to a hurricane, workplace violence. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on, right? There are a number of things that can knock off your business. So you need to kind of have plans for a lot of eventualities, and regionally, like for instance, we're out here in California. I engage in earthquake preparedness. Why? Because earthquakes are a thing here, apparently, right? The ground shakes a little bit once in a while, kind of freaks people out. The minute after it stops shaking, everybody runs to the store and for some reason, like clears out the shelves of water. That's not all you need, but I see what you're doing there. I see what you did. But the reality is that if people aren't paying attention to things that can impact their businesses regionally, or in some cases, if you're, as an example, if you're a manufacturing business and you rely on your supply chain for different parts to build your product, right? Well, where are your suppliers located? What happens if one of your suppliers is in Louisiana? What just hit Louisiana? Hurricane. That's going to stop production of things. That's going to impact your supply chain. So you may not get a critical part, which now means, what do you do? Mm-hmm. So you need to build in redundancies. You need to build in plans and the ability to pivot when something happens, like a hurricane or like a earthquake, or, if you have a plan of what you're going to do, you're more likely to be a little bit more confident in kind of moving forward with things, because then you're not having to, and in some cases with some of our clients, we've had to help them build the plane while they're flying it. They've been impacted by COVID or, other civil unrest, those type of things, and they weren't prepared. And now we're helping them get up to speed, which is great. But I always recommend, hey, preparedness means before, continuity means, after, right? That means you're going to be able to continue things after a business disruption or disaster or something along those lines.
Yeah. Which, I would ask the ambitious vet listening to this, and I'll ask the ambitious vet first, which one do you think costs more, the afterwards or the proactiveness? Right. And then I'll ask Dave, man, what would you say? What costs more, reacting after the disaster or before, and why?
Well, I think there's several costs, and we always think of costs in monetary terms, but it's costs of time, and other types of resources that become more exponential after an event versus prior to, and I get it. I know there's probably some of your folks out there that are business owners that are single person, LLCs, they're small businesses, they operate out of their home. That doesn't relieve you of the responsibility of serving your clients. They depend on your product or service in some cases. And if you can't deliver, then they're going to go elsewhere. So the idea is to hold on to as much of your market as possible by making sure that you're prepared to pivot when something bad happens. And again, a business disruption could last for an hour, and I like to use this example too. Somebody who has maybe a brick and mortar storefront, small candy store, whatever it happens to be. Well, the power goes out, right? Something very simple. And I use this example because this happened to us working when I was still the chief of police at the VA. We had a power outage at our hospital that impacted. Now, obviously, a candy store and a hospital are very different, but I also like to point out, especially in our after action review, which I'll talk a little bit about later, this was just a power outage, and it had widespread impacts all over the hospital. As a business owner, if the power goes out in your store, what are you doing for that next hour? How about 4 hours? What if it's out for 8 hours? You know, a lot of people have things like credit card machines that run on electricity. So what are you doing? How are you working? What is your backup plan? At the end of the day, what's your backup plan?
Yeah.
If you don't have one, or if you haven't thought about it, you probably should, especially if you live in anywhere where there's hurricanes or tornadoes or earthquakes or any types of natural disasters. You should know the crime rates in your neighborhood, especially if you're a brick and mortar, because you should pay attention to the news to see, hey, are there protests? Are there rioters? Are there, what's happening? You should check your insurance policies. These are things you should be doing right up front when you're forming your business.
Yeah, versus being like, oh, that's the cheapest piece of real estate to get the business going, going off the, how inexpenses are, right? Sometimes the cheapest isn't always the best. And even go ahead.
I sorry to interrupt, but I have a good friend of mine who loves to say cheap is expensive.
Yes, I can see that.
Cheap is very expensive. So I don't credit that to me. I credit that to my brother, but I will tell you that I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, I have probably 3 or 4 ambitious vets within this network here that have had their websites hacked and have been down for, weeks, right? And the money that it's taken because they didn't have the proactive software ahead to get that back up and get into the coding and see whatever the hackers are doing, they've had to spend thousands of dollars to get their site back up. So Ambitious Vet, that's another example. And Dave, it sounds like, with your background, being able to, spot risk, assessing and all that kind of stuff, you can really spot those gaps. Where do you think that came from? Just your background or?
Well, I think it comes from a lot of years spending time looking for, being in law enforcement, emergency management, corporate security. We're basically paid to look for problems, right?
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. So you can translate a lot of those skills into, for instance, doing physical security assessments and things like that. I do a lot of assessments for clients, especially of their facilities, and all of those things are, there's a lot of dimensions that are looked at in their organization. Some people bring me in because they're worried about a specific problem, right? Some people are like, well, I don't know what the problems are. How do I figure that out? Okay, well, the best way is to come in and do an assessment of your organization and figure out where your vulnerabilities are. And once we can figure out where your vulnerabilities are, then we can put together an action plan to fix, or mitigate all of them. Because the reality is that not everything is going to be addressable by a client, and that's the reality. But you can still put things in place to mitigate something's effect on the business, even if you can't eliminate it.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. I mean, I love that you can be able to spot that, because not everyone can do that. And it's a prime example that we pay for clarity sometimes, we just want the clarity. Right. So I think that's a very profitable skill set. So I want to ask you, what is one essential business function that an ambitious vet could start, applying, in a key industry that you're specialized in right now, that could help minimize risk and get ahead of something like this in the future without sacrificing like the brand equity, like stuff that they've already built up? What would be one business function?
So, so when we talk, so essential functions for a business are going to vary from business to business, right?
Right.
So if you're a restaurant, your whole goal in life is to make food, right? And serve food inside your restaurant. But what we've seen, especially with COVID-19, you've had a lot of restaurants that maybe didn't do delivery, didn't do online ordering, didn't do a lot of these different things. Looking at your business model, what does your business do? What is its function? How do you make money, right? Then you need to kind of apply, okay, well, these are the things my business does. As an example, a restaurant, or a candy store. Hey, we provide, lollipops and all these different kinds of things for customers. Okay, but are they made on site? No, we get them shipped here by our manufacturer. Okay, well, what does your supply chain look like? That's an essential function for that business. That function, their supply chain, right? So if you have a weak supply chain, or you're not really sure what your supply chain looks like, really doing some analysis of your business and taking a look at the critical functions. Any critical functions I would also classify as anything that is delivery facing, right? Anything that would prohibit you from delivering your final product or service to your client is an essential function.
Yeah, that's great. Because like supply chains have been hit the hardest during this time, right? Oh man, I'm thinking of even trying to get into institutions for some thought leadership, type stuff. Even right now for us, it's like, hey, we're still trying to figure out our strategic plan. So I'm hearing like for your firm, you would help them come in and kind of reassess what their strategic plan is, so they don't have the long drawn out supply chains and all the hiccups now, right? Because there's guys like me that want to do some kind of corporate partnerships or some strategic stuff, and we're stopped because of other people's supply chains, right? So that's key, man. That is
Yep.
key. So I want to ask you, before we shift gears and thank our sponsor, I mean, Dave, what would be, right now, like a key industry that you're seeing getting hit with the current disaster? What's like some industries that you've worked with, or some industries that are really getting hit hard now?
So one of the industries that I'm currently working with is higher education. Higher education is being brutalized right now for a variety of reasons. Especially institutions that host international students and things of that nature. Obviously, there's travel restrictions, and there's you have folks who are first time going to college, as an example, and they didn't sign up for online. Hey, I got accepted into, some, great school, and now I have to do everything online. And, people aren't paying for apartments and on-campus housing. And, people don't understand a lot of the ancillary things too. Like, if they have contractors that provide food at the university or college, well, they're not selling anything right now. A lot of folks that work in commercial buildings, like, the coffee vendor downstairs, well, nobody's going to the office right now. So that guy's not making any money. So what's his plan to pivot? Hey, well, maybe I should just wheel my cart outside, instead of being inside. And now I'm outside, and maybe I'll get some foot traffic outside, or maybe I just need to relocate permanently.
Yeah.
But higher ed is really taking a beating right now. They've lost an innumerable amount of money so far. I mean, some people are still willing to do the online experience, which is great. But that doesn't help some of these institutions with housing, other types of income that they're, so what do you do, right? Well, some are pivoting and having like a hybrid program. Hey, maybe we'll meet on campus twice a week, properly socially distanced. But that also creates a whole host of risk, especially organizations that are considering reopening, like office environments and stuff. There needs to be some thoughtful diligence before you do that. because, when you're talking about people, it's going to be very easy right now for people to file workers' comp claims for COVID, if they get it when you bring them back to the office. So there needs to be a lot of thought process before you're bringing people back, as an organization, and it should be done with a cross-functional team. It shouldn't be done in a vacuum.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that wisdom. It really got it concrete, and thank you for that. So, Ambitious Vet, we're going to take a quick 10-second break to thank our sponsor. Right when we get back, we're going to be diving into Dave Weiner's 3 golden grenades to keep you unstuck in your life, career, and business. We'll be right back. If you're looking for on-demand knowledge and wisdom from today's top minds on the go, I've got a great recommendation for you. Check out Audible, where for only $15 a month, you can consume thousands of titles from podcasts, guided wellness programs, audiobooks, and exclusive Audible originals you won't find anywhere else. Try it out for free on us with a 30-day trial by simply visiting www.audibletrial.com/AMV. Again, that's www.audibletrial.com/A as in Alpha, M as in Mike, V as in Victor. All right, Ambitious Vet, we're right back inside the trenches with the one and only Dave Weiner. He's been dropping in golden grenades after golden grenade the whole episode around how can you be proactive versus reactive inside your business as we look to adapt to our new norm out here in this new business world. So I'm excited to see what he unpackages as far as his 3 golden grenades. Dave, take it away, man. What would be 3 golden grenades that you would like to drop in here to help an ambitious vet stay unstuck in their life?
Well, the first one I would say is acquire a taste for whiskey if you don't have it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I think if you are considering the passionate pursuit of entrepreneurship and having your own entity, your own business, as an example, and you're in a job maybe you're not happy with, start planning your escape, for lack of a better term. Okay, start planning that. Some people just will dive off and try to go do their own thing, and that's great, but planning out your escape and planning out what you're going to do, and maybe getting your business formed and a few other things before you punch out of your organization would be appropriate. And along with that, research your market. Research how big is your market? Are you going to be able to sell? Who are your competitors? What is the value of what you're trying to sell? What's your marketing plan? How are you going to market? Marketing's not cheap. Okay. There are ways to do that. And the other thing I always tell people is if you're not on LinkedIn and you haven't been networking, get on LinkedIn, start networking. Connect with me right off the bat if you haven't done that. And I'd be happy to make introductions to my network and things of that nature, especially if you're trying to grow your network. And if you're not active on LinkedIn, you should be posting quite a bit. You should be interacting with posts. You should be commenting on things. You should be letting people know who you are. Because the reality is most people buy things from people they know, like, and trust. And if they don't know you, they don't have the ability to really like you, and you're never going to know if they're going to trust you or not. So that's why I'm always saying, say yes to a lot of things, build your network, and plan your escape. That's what I'd say.
That's great. That's awesome. So planning out your escape, ambitious vet, researching your market, and also make sure that you're being consistent on a professional networking site like LinkedIn, so you can start building that quality network that you want to develop, right? To continue to create that opportunity you're looking for to find new levels of success. Dave, man, where can people find more about you, more about what you're doing right now, and also how can they connect with you?
So you can go directly to my website, www.secure-measures.com. Or I can be reached at 310-507-1493. always happy to connect with fellow veterans, especially if they have questions about business and that nature. Always happy to guide and mentor whenever I have the opportunity. I'm on LinkedIn. Very easy to find me. Very easy to find me on there. So.
Yeah. An ambitious vet, what I challenge you to do is give Dave a call. He's offering a free consultation to a certain number of you listening to the show. So if you're looking to get more proactive in your business versus reactive, we all know it costs more sometimes to be reactive, depending on your industry. Go ahead and figure out what your risk are. Get your assessments done so you can start getting out ahead of the curve for stuff like this in the future. Dave, man, thanks for joining the Ambitious Vet Show, man.
Chris, thank you for your time today. Truly grateful for this opportunity.
The Ambitious Vet is available on all popular podcast platforms. Go to vettrainingcoaching.com to subscribe, rate, and share with fellow vets.
Thanks again to Rooftop Leadership. If it wasn't for them sponsoring this show, this free content, these free golden grenades that you're getting on a weekly basis, Ambitious Vet, would not be possible. And if you're ready to be an action taker and immerse yourself into a 3-day intensive live training that will have you ready to champion the toughest issues facing leaders today with the most powerful tool in your arsenal, your rooftop story, check out rooftopleadership.com now and enter in code AMBITIOUS for your 10% military discount and get out there and own your story.